Oh, welcome everyone. My name is Randy. You're on the Passionately Wrong podcast. I'm here with James, and today we're going to continue what we talked about in our last episode, which was about healthcare. And last time we talked about healthcare in different countries and compared to the US, mostly European countries. But this time we're going to talk about some myths, misconceptions, and maybe some things that are people are passionately wrong about. I've heard a lot of civilians are passionately wrong about VA care and care in the military and things like that. Given that I'm not an expert, but I know a lot about it, and James has questions, I'll turn it over to James to ask me questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Randy. So, one of the things that I have been impressed by as we've talked over the course of many episodes is how many really great benefits there are to people serving in the military. And you got to deal with serving in the military to get those benefits, but a smart person can take advantage of them. And if you were to line them all up and add them all up, I would say it really makes, to an outsider hearing about it, the military seem like an attractive value proposition. And education is a huge one. But for today, I want to talk with you a little bit about what seems to be a gigantic benefit, healthcare. Especially as we talked last time, the costs of healthcare in the US can be extraordinarily high. Never mind the insurance you pay. If you're unlucky, you have some procedure that isn't covered, or you have parts of your costs that aren't covered, and you can end up with really high out of pocket costs. One of the drivers of bankruptcy in the US are unexpected medical bills. It's a real issue. So, first of all, here's the basic question. Is it true that as a military veteran, your healthcare costs are free? Are they entirely free? Do you have copays? Are they free everywhere? Do you have to go to certain doctors? Is it only certain hospitals? Maybe you could just give us what is actually veteran healthcare, and is it as great as it sounds from the outside?
So I think we should start with healthcare in the military first.
What's it like when you're serving? Sure, that's a benefit.
Every dental, medical, eyesight, everything is completely free for you and your family. I don't know if that includes like braces, but the and the you have doctors that went to med school, and a lot of them got their med school paid by the military, and then they had to serve so many years. I had a friend of mine who was in ROTC, was planning on going to med school, did ROTC scholarship for the first 4 years of college, and decided he didn't want to owe the military 8 years. So he paid for medical school himself. And then he ended up retiring the military. And I don't know if there was this deal after the first 4 years where it's like, hey, if you stay in, we'll pay your medical school. I think there's deals like that are made, but I don't know. But so these are very well qualified doctors. They come from all walks of life. They're probably, I wouldn't put it past them, but there's probably not maybe Harvard medical school doctors. I don't know. But they go to American medical schools and they come out with all the qualifications, and they still got to certify, do the state certifications and things like that. So they're perfectly qualified. Their insurance is paid by the military. There's not any need for insurance. There's not a whole military guy suing the doctors that I've seen. I've never had a problem. I've had multiple surgeries in the military, to include they do LASIKs now and things like that for free. One of the things you got to understand is, and people are going, why did you get a LASIK? Sounds like it's an elective surgery. In order for them to keep an optometrist in the military, he's got to be current on what's going on outside the military in order for him to retire and work as an optometrist. And at the time I got my eye surgery, that was the big thing. And if you didn't walk out of the military with 500 eye surgeries under your belt, eye correction surgeries, then no one would look at you. You wouldn't be paid as much. So all that, I'm sure that crosses over to every expertise. Hey, if you can't do so much of whatever your specialty is, and it's an elective surgery, then it's not going to help me in the outside world. So please allow me to do this. And so that's what some of that crossover is. However, I can also see where if you're in the outside world and you're getting a lot of surgeries for obese people or plastic surgeries or things like that, and you're not getting that experience in the US in the military because you're getting exposed to people that are in pretty good shape. And so therefore you're not getting those normal surgeries for older people. If that's what your specialty is going to include when you get out, you might not get the experience you want. However, the orthopedics probably gets more experience than about people outside in a lot of cases, and trauma, things like that. So you can, depending on what what you want to pad your resume with and what profession you're in, it might be more beneficial. But the Army also offers a lot of benefits for doctors. They offer big bonuses. Like if they don't have enough optometrists, they may say, hey, we're going to give optometrists so much money for 4 years. If you join for 4 years, we'll give you a $50,000 bonus at the year. I'm just making out numbers, but I've heard of things like that. So I'm sure they're out there. It all depends on your profession, the need, and things like that. So the military covered everything. And in a way, it's if you don't live close to a base, they have agreements where they'll farm that out to a local so you can get your surgery or your physical therapy or something in a civilian place, and the military will pay them. So you don't have to drive 40 miles to the base, depending on, you got some options. And some of that's changed over the last couple of years. Some of the dental benefits have changed, and I'm not sure what that is since I left. So there have been some changes, but for the most part, for my career, myself, my kids, my wives, all were fully covered while I was in the military and never had a problem. I had my eye surgery. I had a knee surgery. I had a finger that needed physical or occupational therapy after some martial arts training. I had multiple medical conditions that were taken care of with all kinds of medicine and procedures. I was pretty happy for the most part with most of my medical care while I was in the military. If you make it to retirement, you have the option to continue because the medical service while you're in the military is called Tricare. And you have an option to continue your Tricare once you get out if you want to sign up for it. And as I mentioned last time and a couple other times in our podcast, if you're single, it's $100 a month. If you have family, it doesn't matter how many family members, it's $200 a month. And it's not as inclusive. There's maximums and there's deductibles and there's all kinds of stuff, but it's a really good, I've never paid any money out of pocket yet in the last 5 years. And then in addition to that, if you have any disability from your service, which the VA pays and the VA hospitals, I think what we were referring to earlier is the stories you've been hearing about VA hospitals. Depending on the level of your disability, you can have between 0 to 100%, up to 50%, up to 40%, anything that they have a list of things that the Army did to you that they say, this is 40%. You have a bum knee and you're half a finger missing or whatever. And they say, okay, we caused that. So if you have anything that needs to be addressed that is that or has arisen because of that, if you have a bum knee and now your hips are displaced because you're walking weird and you can attribute the hip to the knee, then they'll also cover that. Any operations, procedures, medicine to address those things under 40%, then you can go to the VA hospital. They have the list of things that they will take care of. They'll do all that stuff at the VA hospital. If you have 50% or over, they just cover 100% of your problems. Doesn't matter if they're affiliated with the things that the military did. They're just saying, hey, if you're over 50%, we consider you over 50% disabled. We will take care of any of your problems for the rest of your life.
Do you think the military are tough graders, or is it easy to get yourself with some percentage of disability? I'm remembering offhand a remark Charlie said during our discussion, which was each time he did a jump, he's like, "Woohoo, another 1% disability." And I assume he was joking, but there must have been something behind that.
First of all, the military doesn't do what the VA does. Different organizations, different money.
Okay.
Second of all, I would say it's not difficult. If you have 10 years of service, you probably have 10, 20, 30% based on things. And also they recognize at a certain point, like jumping out of airplanes in the military is different than civilian jumping. The landing is different. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder on your spine and your knees and everything. So they've recognized there are certain things that they will say that, hey, if you have so many jumps, or if you're even on jump status, then we're going to give you like an automatic 20% for your knees and lower back. And so they take that in consideration. And sometimes it takes a while, like that's already in the system, but sometimes like Agent Orange for Vietnam for the longest time wasn't considered carcinogenic. But now so many Vietnam veterans have gotten cancer that they've automatically said, okay, if you were ever in Vietnam and exposed to Agent Orange, and really I think the threshold for proving that you were exposed was like, did you have orders to go to Vietnam? It maybe there's a little bit more, but I think it's been reduced to something like that. Then if you will be covered for cancer, and you're automatically going to get 10% too on top of that. And then every 10% gives you a paycheck too. The VA will pay you for the harm that was caused to you for serving in the military. So 10%, you're going to get $200 a month for the rest of your life. 100%, you can get up to $4,000 a month for the rest of your life. It depends on, and then everything in between. And it also depends on how many dependents you have. So that's why there's a range. If you're single, if you have a wife, if you still have kids that you're supporting, you'll get a different amount than a single guy that got out after 2 years or something like that.
And this
So
is all administered by the VA. So that would be different than whatever military pension you accrued over your years of service.
correct. And also, but the military has another program. They have a medical retirement program where, hey, you can no longer function in your job in the military because of the damage you sustained while you're in the military. So we will retire you before 20 years, and you will receive this for the rest of your life as a medical retirement, which is significantly less than what you would have got if you had retired at a higher rank. But you now get to move on with your life outside the military and get this amount. And so they have a couple programs like that. And they also have another program which that military pays. It specifically addresses all combat, any injury you sustained in combat that is causing you continuous problems, or that you got preparing for combat or training for combat. So anything to do with combat, if you have to fill out a lot of paperwork and submit it and say, I was jumping for 25 years, preparing to jump into combat, which is a true story. You're in a parachute unit. So then therefore the 20% that I got for my back and my knees, that goes over to the military disability too. And so you can get the VA disability and you can say, did this have anything to do with combat? I'm going to apply that to this. And you can get kind of not two payments. It's a weird way. I can't explain it. It's hard to explain. I can explain it, but it's going to take another podcast to do it. But you don't get two payments. You get one or the other, but the one that you don't get actually discounts if you're retired, it discounts from your retirement for tax-free money. I think we talked about this at one time. So you'll get 3 checks. You'll get your retirement check, you'll get your VA disability check, and then you'll get a check for disability from the military. But it's whatever that is, if let's say it's 2,000, they're going to discount that from your retirement check, and you only get taxed on your retirement check, and all the other stuff's not taxed. So it's like a tax refund or something.
I have 2 questions in this context. One of them is subjective, but I'm still interested in your thoughts. And that would be, do you think the system is fair in light of what people suffer and we're talking about injuries and disability and degradation and quality of life and all of that. So when you think of your own circumstances and all the people that that's the first question. Do you think this generally works out okay? And the second question, and maybe it's a way to reflect upon the first one, Randy, is in the private sector, we hear stories of police officers in California or firefighters retiring with $175,000 a year pensions because whatever, that's how the system is set up. And we call them frontline workers, right? People who are exposed and at risk. The policeman, the firefighter, they serve 20 years and then they're entitled at 40 now, they're entitled to $150,000 a year pension. Do you have similar stories of people to an outsider's eye who did nothing more than their job and didn't really get exposed to a lot of risk, making off with a significant health-related or disability pension when they really don't deserve it? So the 2 sides of the fairness question, if you will.
I don't see the military. So there's so many non-impact, non-combat jobs in the military. So people sign up to do a job in the military, right? Now, if along the way they don't qualify for the job they signed up, they could end up in the infantry or something else, which is not what they planned on doing. But then they could also get out. And most people who do 3 or 4 years on a one enlistment, they don't end up disabled or injured unless they go to combat. And then I'm pretty sure they deserve everything they got if they went to combat and got blown up. Now, people get disability for getting in a Hummer accident on a base going to McDonald's or something. But that's damage while they were serving the military, and they could get 10, 20%, or depending on the damage, if they hit their head, they could get a TBI, they could get all this stuff. So is that any different than someone driving to work, getting in an accident? And so that there's that, but it's also hard to differentiate those people from the people who are, I'm helping a veteran write a book about his military career and his PTSD experience in the military and afterwards. And he went to 60 days, a really good PTSD expert center, counseling center in San Antonio. And he found out what his triggers were. And one of his triggers were people telling stupid war stories. And it's funny because I think about this thing. I saw an actress what's the actress's name? Emily Blunt. And what's the British comedian who turned into like a political kind of speaker? His name Randall something or Brand.
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. So Russell Brand and Emily Blunt were on a talk show, and she was like, and the talk show host was like, "Hey, I heard you went to wherever, the Bahamas, and you swam with the sharks." "Oh yeah, I swam with the sharks." They were like, just like, and Russell Brand's, but like, what kind of shark? He was big. It was like 6 feet. I was like, yeah, but did it eat people? Was it a people eating shark? He's like, I don't know. I don't think so. Cause it was here and it was right here. So you just swam by a big fish. She's like, no, I mean, it wasn't, it was just a big fish. It's a fish story. Great story, Emily. Great story. And he was making fun of her. And then the really funny thing with that one has nothing to do with what we're talking about, is the lady next to her was talking about swimming with the dolphins. And I didn't just swim with the dolphins. And then Emily Blunt's, oh yeah, you should never touch dolphins because they can smell you on there and they'll never mate again if you do that. She's like, oh, I probably screwed up a lot of dolphin marriages because they taught me how to ride on their noses. And she's, what? And they got a video of this lady next to her riding on 2 dolphin noses into the air. And that's a good story. Not if I swam with a fish. And Emily Blunt was all mad. But anyway, so this thing is what triggered him. A lot of his stuff, because he was a Green Beret. He went, I don't know how many times he deployed, but he saw people get blown up and that his friends didn't come home. And then people who served during that same time period and maybe went to combat, but never left like the big bases or was never really in danger. It's funny how the military works sometimes, but you got a huge military base with like lots of guards and walls and lots of space between the wall and there's all kinds of wire that prevents anyone from getting close to the wall in some cases. And some bad guy or a kid or an idiot shoots a rocket that barely hit the wall or didn't even get close to the wall, and everyone puts on alert. And the next day, everyone puts in awards for the people that reacted to the rocket that didn't hit the wall or whatever, stuff like that. And he was in this group counseling, and he would just get really mad because this guy's, yeah, I was like number 60 out of 62 vehicles that we were traveling from here to here in Afghanistan. And the second truck got hit by an ID. And I had a panic attack, but that's 30 miles ahead because there's so many trucks. And he would just get mad. He's like, you were on the 60th truck, man. It was like a firework or something. What the hell are you talking about? Why are you even here? And he would just get really mad. And the truth is, everyone has their own trauma. And the problem with people like that were infantry and the Green Berets and the Rangers is they just got hardened to it. Like the first time everything happened, and most of the time it was a lot closer than 60 vehicles away, it was pretty traumatic. But then by the 3rd or 4th firefight, you're just working. You're doing what you have to do. You're dragging bodies to safety. You're shooting at the enemy. You're solving problems. And that's what you do every deployment after that. And then you hear about the guy who was in the 60th vehicle back there. And sometimes you're like, why are you even here, man? Why are you getting 100% disability? And because of your PTSD, when I got 90 for my 5 IED injuries and whatever. So that's what really triggered. That's one of the things that triggered him. And of course, it happens because we were at war for 20 years in most of the Middle East and Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. It happened all the time. It happens all the time. You go to Big Burger King and people are saying, there it was, man. And the other problem with the stories is they're never complete. It's never the full story. They never talk about, especially when they're talking to civilians, they rarely talk about the people that died and the people they had to get pulled off and the aftermath and how we had to use the body bags and and take care of the enemy dead and the friendly dead and everything. And so it's just it's there I was, man. I had so much ammunition and 5 grenades and there's 20 of them. And so that's what his trigger was. And so does it get abused? I'm sure it does, but it's hard to make those cases because everyone experiences different trauma in different situations. And some of these guys never intended to be in combat, and all of a sudden they're on a logistics run and they're in it. And they don't have the newest combat equipment because their unit wasn't outfitted. They don't have the best guns because that's not what they went out there to do. And that's what they ended up with, whatever they got. And so in some cases, they weren't as prepared as us. They didn't get, sometimes we go 4 months preparing to go to combat, shooting and calling and communicating to aircraft to call fire in and being prepared for different ambush situations and getting all that training. Not all units got that, especially ones that weren't prepared to go to war. And so I have a hard time saying they didn't deserve it. And it's hard. It's really hard to get 100%. And every percentage has a different benefits. A guy who's 100% disabled gets around a $1,300 a month stipend for all his kids and his wife to go to college. And a guy that's got 100% disability is making a livable income off his disability. He's getting $4,000 a month, which is above poverty level for sure. And in some cases, it's a lot better. You can live pretty well if you don't have any other debts or anything like that. That's almost $50,000 a year and it's tax free. So if you're 100% disabled and you don't even have to retire, if you're 4 years in and you get 100% disabled, you're getting $50,000 a year. There's probably about 15 or 20 different benefits for 100% disabled people that the other people who have less than that don't get. So it's like the golden goose that people are hitting for, not just the monetary piece, but a lot of other stuff. And there's also a shame. There's a personal shame. And some people were like, oh, I wasn't as hurt as lost his arm and his leg, so I don't deserve 100%. Or I can still walk. And that guy, he's in a wheelchair. So why do I deserve 100%? And so you have people who went to combat, got injured, got blown up, got shot, that don't want to put all that on paper or don't think they deserve it. And then you have people who served 3 or 4 or 8 years, didn't really participate in firefights or anything like that, but they have other injuries that were caused by the military for various reasons, like Hummer accident on the way to McDonald's or whatever. And they add up to 100. They end up adding up to 100 because either they know how to game the system or they actually have the stuff that adds up to 100 just because of all the small stuff adds up eventually. And so then you look at that guy who got 100% and you got blown up 3 times and then you get a little bitter not because he got more than you, but that he didn't deserve it because the guy your friend in the wheelchair and your friend that lost his arm didn't get it or did get it and they deserved it. And you don't think that guy deserves it. And then there's the other thing with like, why are these guys getting disability pay for getting in a car accident on the way to McDonald's just because they were in a military vehicle and they were working that day? If they had been in their own truck and got it in an accident, they wouldn't have got it, except they would because they were still active duty military. And then they would be assessed for that. And they would probably get that added into their medical record. And it would be part of the things that get assessed. So they would actually, if they got in a civilian car accident while they were working and while they were active duty. So there's a lot of So there's some bitterness out there. There's some shame. There's whatever I say. I don't try to be an expert at it, but I did go through it, and I have a lot of friends that go through it, and I try to mentor them because a lot of people who are getting out, I don't like. I have a friend, and she barely applied for anything, and I'm like, why? I was in the Air Force. I never went to combat. I was like, yeah, but you served 24 years. You lifted heavy things. The military told you to lift without a back brace. You did this, you did that. You were told to run every day, and now you have permanent shin splints or whatever her problem is. But she had the shame factor, and she didn't apply for what she could have. So does that answer your question? Over answer it?
You did answer it, Randy. I wasn't sure you were answering it, but of course, it is appropriate considering the subject was fairness, that the answer is also nuanced. And I do appreciate that you didn't try to give me a quick answer, that you really went through this from several angles internally, how a person feels, how they feel maybe compared to friends and colleagues that they know, external from the outside looking in, the idea that we should always give the benefit of the doubt to people who have actually been in combat situations and don't assume that their level of preparedness and mental preparedness is the same as others. All that was really quite valuable and helpful for us. And it's a good lesson generally when examining situations. The desire to come to a quick answer and a simple answer is strong, but it's sloppy thinking in a way. Tough questions do have nuanced facts and circumstances that you need to consider. And sometimes you're left with it depends. It really does depend. I would add just one thing, and you touched on it a little bit at the end, that in any organization of size, you're going to have people with different individual motivations. And I observed, partly because of my role, that there's always going to be a certain number of people, and luckily it's small, but there are a certain number of people who do take advantage of and game the system to personal advantage. And then there are others who, out of a sense of, for all the reasons you just mentioned, won't take advantage of what's on offer to them, even when they fully deserve it. So it's fact specific, it's person specific, it's circumstances specific. And that's as good an answer as I could have asked for when it comes to the question of, is it fair? So I appreciate your giving it the time and thought that it deserves. Any other points that you want to bring across here that we didn't touch upon before we wrap it up today?
No, there's been a lot of stuff in the news about how the VA is a terrible system.
Yes.
And there's a lot of congressmen who are like, "Hey, our veterans are suffering, and we need more." And there's when I got out, there was a huge veteran homeless problem. And from my perspective, knowing what the VA offers, because I was a VA benefits advisor for a year when I got out, they've done a lot. But I think let's just talk about the VA homeless problem. We have a homeless problem in the United States that we haven't been able to fix. Why? Some of them are drug users. Some of them don't want to get off the street. Yeah, I hear this, right? I try not to believe it. I don't want to believe it, but I guess there are some people who just don't want to get off the street for whatever reason, whether they are a drug user, they're ashamed to go home, whatever the problem is. And I would go back to what I said a while back, which is the military is a subset of society. So we have a VA problem, a veteran problem that won't get off the street. We have probably one of the largest veteran populations we've ever had in the history of the country. So it all aligns that way. That doesn't mean that they should. There's a lot of things in place that the VA and individual states and the federal government have put into place, but the VA has put in specific programs in place to help people get off the street. There's a lot of things that people just aren't aware of because if you're a veteran of the Iraq-Afghan war, you can get treated for all your injuries for 2 or 3 years until we figure it out and things like that. There's mental counseling for vets, like for their whole life that's available. You don't have to have any percentage to get it. It's available. I think that was a really good addition for the government to say, yeah, these guys are going to come back with issues. They may not know it when they get out, but they're going to have issues. So they've incorporated some stuff where pretty much every large city in the United States and some smaller ones, you can find a place where you can talk to somebody. And it's not just about your PTSD. It's about family problems or financial problems. It's counseling in general, and they have some experts in different areas there. So I've not had a problem. I think it depends on what city and how overwhelmed the VA hospital gets. But I personally, from Texas, and from Fort Worth, Dallas area, I haven't had any problem with the VA system at all. And they have VA hospitals, but then they have smaller clinics that are, if they know that there's a lot of veterans in a certain area, they'll open a clinic that will take care of their needs. I've never had a problem getting an appointment. I've had 2 large operations through the VA, and both of them were done. I never had the last one was 3 or 4 years ago, and I haven't had any complications or problems afterwards. I'm sure there are people who had complications, but I would also say that in the civilian world, there's complications, with operations. That's just one of the risks you take when you get operations. Ideally, it wasn't because the doctor wasn't any good. And I don't think there's the doctors that don't care. The great thing about the VA system is for the majority of people who are getting taken care of at the VA hospital, it's free. And the doctors aren't making money off the drugs they're giving them or the procedures they're doing. The big pharma is not. Big pharma is involved probably at a higher level in the VA. Hey, we're selling you these drugs because of this and this, and someone's up there's making a decision, and hopefully they're not getting a cut. But at the level where the doctors are prescribing it, they're not making any cuts. They're just working for the VA and they're getting a salary. And so why wouldn't you give him the best medicine and the best tests for his problem? And I've never had a problem not getting a test or not getting my meds, and they've really made it easier. Like you can get your meds by mail, so you don't even have to go in there. If you need to get refills, you just sign up online. You're allowed 5 refills. You say, hey, I need my next refill. And maybe the doctor has to check off the next day when he gets an email, but that's about it. So to make it a lot easier, I have nothing but good things to say about my experience with the VA, to tell you the truth. And I know there's a lot of horror stories. I don't know if those are the exception or if I'm the exception, but that's been my experience.
This does illustrate, thanks, Randy, for that. It's good to hear, a problem in critical thinking generally, which is we are heavily influenced by anecdotes, and we are also more heavily influenced by negative outcomes than we are by positive ones. So what will get reported in the newspaper, what will get talked about in a congressional hearing are the examples of bad things happening, but we don't know how representative they are, neither from that hearing nor from, unfortunately, hearing the positive anecdote on the other side. So really, the only thing that will give you a good sense of what's happening is a broad-based study that looks at all the patient outcomes. I am, however, encouraged by the comments you make about what are the incentives of the VA itself and of the doctors working in the VA. And they're actually quite well aligned with the well-being of their patients, more so than you might see in the private sector, which is interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Like you said, they're not making any money off of prescribing you drugs. Are not worried about getting sued for over or under giving you tests. So from that perspective, the incentives are a little bit better aligned.
You get the best doctors, though? That's the question. Hopefully,
you also made a good point about why the military needs to be competitive with the private sector in attracting doctors in the first place. So
then the VA is different. The VA is going to go, hey, I need a doctor. And why is that doctor volunteering to work at the VA? Ideally, he's a patriot and he wants to help. He wants to help. I'm not sure that's always true. I'm sure they have some great doctors and great surgeons that work at the VA, but they're probably all overworked as well. There's a lot of people going to the VA hospitals and maybe there's not enough of them. But my experience has been, for the most part, very positive.
Again, that's good to hear, Randy. And as always, listeners, we hope that you found our discussion interesting, both because of the subject matter, but also because of the occasional hints about tricks and traps when it comes to thinking and just assessing how you think about a topic. I might be more uninformed about some of the things we talk about, Randy, but I feel like the process of figuring out how I should think about a topic, I almost always come away from our discussions with new information, a new way to think about something. And I appreciate the process of learning how to think a little bit better by virtue of our discussions. And we hope you do too, listeners. So thanks for being here today. We hope you come back for the next episode.
And leave any comments or questions for us, and we always respond. Take care, guys. Bye. We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.